Hello, welcome to Space Command. My name is Brian, and we are going to be talking about space news. Everything going on with this new space race that's going on. Did you know that we're in the middle of a brand new modern space race? That's right, we are. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about everything space. So welcome. Uh, First thing I want to mention is that it has been 3,006 days since we've been able to launch American astronauts from American soil into space to the International Space Station. Does that not blow your mind? 3,006 days. Wow, that's a lot. Well, since that time, which was July 21st, 2011, that's when the Space Shuttle Atlantis ended its mission, and that was the last time that we were able to send astronauts into space. And of course, the commander of that mission was Christopher Ferguson. The pilot was Douglas Hurley. The mission specialist 1 was Sandra Magnus, and mission specialist 2 was Rex Walheim. Space Shuttle Atlantis is now on display, retired, at the Kennedy Space Center. So, if you're ever in that direction, stop by and visit the Space Shuttle Atlantis. Since that time, the only way that we've been able to send American astronauts to the International Space Station is on board a Russian Soyuz capsule. And we pay about $86 million per seat to send our astronauts to the International Space Station from Russia. Can you believe that? $86 million a seat. Well, we've sent approximately 45 different astronauts on the Russian Soyuz capsule throughout the years. If you do the math, that's $3.87 billion. $3.87 billion. Amazing. That blows your mind too. These are some mind-blowing statistics for you. All right, well, let's talk about some space weather. Getting that out of the way first here. Today, it's a balmy negative 23 degrees Fahrenheit on Mars, and the low is negative 115 degrees Fahrenheit on Mars today. Today's Sol day in Mars is 2555, 2,555. That's the Sol number. So that's the weather on Mars. Be sure you wear a coat. Definitely got to wear a coat. Next on the agenda, we're going to talk about the Space Force. That's right. President Trump's proposed new sixth branch of the military, the Space Force. I think the first likely candidate that we need for the Space Force is the X-37B secret space plane. That's right, it's a secret space plane, top secret. It's built by Boeing, and it's been it's an amazingly successful spacecraft that Boeing has built. There's actually two of them, and it's like a mini space shuttle basically. It could actually fit inside the space shuttle's cargo bay. That's how small it is. It measures 29 feet in length. It has a 9.6 foot tall wingspan. The wingspan is 15 feet, and it's 9.6 feet tall. The payload bay is about the size of a pickup truck bed, believe it or not. And it has an incredibly versatile launch capability. I said it's a space plane or a mini space shuttle. It does launch vertically on top of a rocket, and that is completely versatile. It's launched on several different rocket types, including a Falcon 9, SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Um, right now, it's up in space. It's been up there for a record of 760 days. 760 days up in space. We have no idea what this thing's up there doing, but I can guarantee you it's operated by the U.S. Air Force, and it's probably keeping us safe up there, watching space weather, watching what's going on here on the ground. For example, uh, North Korea launched that rocket. Let's see, I have it written down here somewhere. North Korea launched a ballistic missile just the other day. Launched it from a submarine. Um, Gosh, if we had a space force and the X-37B was up in space when that ballistic missile launched, it landed in the sea of near Japan, Japan's territorial waters. Believe it or not, isn't that crazy? But if we had had that X-37B space plane up there and it had offensive weapon capability or defensive weapon capability, whichever way you want to call it, perhaps we could have destroyed that ballistic missile before it did any damage. Fortunately, like I said, it landed harmlessly in the territorial waters of Japan. Japan's pretty nervous about that. They're not very happy, and I wouldn't be either. So we definitely need a space force. So hopefully that will be up and running soon. We'll be watching here at Space Command, watching for enthusiastically for when that might take place and get going. June 18th, 2018 is when President Trump proposed the Space Force, and they're saying it should be up and running by 2020. Let's hope. Let's hope. All right. All right, well, let's talk about Virgin Galactic. They are operating out of Spaceport America in New Mexico. Um, Boeing recently announced that on October 8th it would make a $20 million investment in Virgin Galactic. That's crazy. That's awesome. $20 million. Now, what the Virgin Galactic is proposing, what they're doing is space tourism. They've got a space plane also. This one, though, is going to take paying passengers up to the edge of space, where they will become astronauts once they reach the Kármán line. The Kármán line is the edge of space, and once they breach that line, they automatically become astronauts, and they'll receive astronaut wings, believe it or not. So that's pretty exciting. They promise it's about a 20-minute trip, and this is the brainchild of Richard Branson, and he stated that he was going to build space planes at a pace of about one per year. And he'll be cashing in on a space tourism industry which is expected to reach $20 billion. The initial commercial launch for the space plane is supposed to be estimated in 2020. So next year. I know they've been testing it. They've had several successful tests. Basically what happens is this space plane, which I'm going to show you an image of here in a minute, but it's carried up to space, a high altitude. By a aircraft that it's attached to the belly of, and once it's up to about 50,000 feet, it may release the space plane. The space plane engages its rocket and then rockets up to the Kármán line, or the edge of space. There are several minutes of weightlessness where the passengers can unbuckle and they'll just be like floating around there in the cabin. and then they've got to at one point buckle back in because the space plane basically falls back to Earth into the atmosphere, and then it becomes a glider, and the plane actually lands on a runway like the space shuttle did. So that's pretty awesome. And like I said, it's a space tourism deal, and it's expected to be about a 20-minute trip. And if you have an extra $250,000, you might be able to buy yourself a ticket on this space plane, and that would be fun, wouldn't it? It's in Las Cruces, New Mexico. That's where it's at. All right. What else have we got to talk about? Well, the Orion, which is manufactured by Lockheed Martin, NASA has announced that Lockheed Martin has completed the testing and construction of the Orion crew capsule for NASA's Space Launch System. The Space Launch System consists of the SLS, which is the rocket, this SLS rocket, and then there's the Orion space capsule, which goes on top of it. It launches our astronauts not to the International Space Station. That's not what it was intended for. It's a bigger capsule than many of the other capsules that are being developed right now. It's a larger capsule, and it's designed to take our astronauts into deep space, the moon and beyond. That's what it's designed for. NASA has contracted Lockheed Martin to purchase 3 more of these Orion space capsules for $2.7 billion, and then plans on ordering another 3 capsules in 2022 for a price of $1.9 billion more. So that is a very successful program right there with the Orion. It's ready to go. It's completed. It is behind schedule, way behind schedule, but it's finally there through all the testing and everything. Meanwhile, the rocket that's supposed to carry it up to space is being built by Boeing, and there we have some serious problems. Problems. Poor Boeing, Boeing. Do they have more on their plate than they can chew? Absolutely. Boeing is very busy in the space industry. They always have been. You can find Boeing spacecraft from the very beginning of when we started going to space, from the beginning of the formation of NASA. Boeing has been a significant contributor to space travel for the United States. But they are having a ton of problems right now. A ton of problems. Like I said, they're building the rocket that'll carry the Orion crew capsule to orbit. NASA is in a near panic at the cost overruns and the delays with the SLS rocket. And of course, you know, Boeing's Max 737 airliner, everyone's seen this in the news lately. The problems experienced with the 737 Max concerning the airplanes is just outrageous. It's some kind of a software problem, and it caused several crashes of that airliner. But not so much in the news is this SLS rocket that Boeing's supposed to be developing for NASA. They're years behind and millions over budget on developing this rocket with no completion date in sight. Oh my goodness. The rocket, like I said, is supposed to carry NASA astronauts in the Orion crew capsule to the moon in 2024. That date, 2024, that date looks questionable at this point with all the cost overruns and the delays that Boeing is experiencing with the SLS rocket. So if you think Boeing's had problems with its 737 MAX airliners and the SLS rocket, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Remember I told you Boeing has just got an extensive hand in spacecraft and development. They're also part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Since NASA retired its space shuttle program, NASA was supposed to turn over the transportation of its astronauts to the International Space Station to private industry. That's right, they were going to contract out to some private companies to build some spacecraft that would carry American astronauts to the ISS from U.S. soil. And we're still waiting. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. When was the last space shuttle mission? 2011? That's the last time we were able to send astronauts, and we're still waiting. And here at Space Command, we are patiently waiting. No, impatiently waiting for the next American spacecraft that'll be able to carry American astronauts into space. Let's see here. So anyway, private industry. SpaceX and Boeing were selected in the contract to develop spaceships to transport American astronauts to the space station. Both Boeing and SpaceX are about 3 years behind schedule on developing these ships for NASA. So I know it's confusing with this new space race and who's doing what, but there are about 6 different capsules, space capsules, being developed by different companies. Let me try and explain it to you. Okay, Lockheed Martin is developing the Orion space capsule that'll be turned over. These capsules, when they're finished, will be turned over to NASA. They'll actually be owned and operated by NASA, the Orion space capsules. We talked about that. And it's supposed to carry NASA astronauts not to the ISS, the International Space Station. It's supposed to carry astronauts to deep space, the moon, and beyond. So we've got that one. NASA envisioned the capsules being developed by Boeing and SpaceX as part of the Commercial Crew Program, and it's supposed to carry astronauts back and forth from the International Space Station, from the United States, from U.S. soil. These capsules will be owned and operated by Boeing and SpaceX. So they won't be owned by NASA, but they will carry NASA astronauts back and forth from the International Space Station. The problem is Boeing and SpaceX are about 3 years behind schedule. Boeing had a setback after a fuel leak during testing which required some redesigning. Meanwhile, NASA's in a near panic. I told you that. They're in a near panic. And why are they in a near panic? Because they're having to consider purchasing more rides for American astronauts on the Russian Soyuz capsules for $86 million per seat. That's right, $86 million per seat. Now Boeing's capsule is called the Starliner, and SpaceX's capsule is the Crew Dragon. And of course, this just in, the problems with the 737 MAX, Boeing's airliner that they've developed, has had so many problems that the CEO, Dennis Muilenburg, did I get that right? Dennis Muilenburg has just been asked to step down, the CEO. The board has asked him to step down and will be removing him as CEO. And that's part of this whole fiasco with the 737 MAX. I imagine it also might have a little bit to do with the major delay on Boeing's Starliner, and SpaceX's, of course, not related to that is the Crew Dragon, but Boeing has replaced its CEO. All right, so what's going on with SpaceX? Are you kidding? You mean besides being the first private company to launch an orbital class rocket to the space station? To space with the Falcon 1? And then the first private company to launch an orbital capsule and dock with the International Space Station and deliver supplies with its cargo Dragon, and Falcon 9 rocket, the first to actually land its first stage rocket back on Earth and reuse the rocket multiple times with its Falcon 9 rocket. Amazing. The design, development, and launches of the most powerful rocket in existence today with the Falcon Heavy, which also lands and reuses its boosters. The inaugural launch of the Falcon Heavy launched Elon Musk's cherry red Tesla Roadster on a trajectory towards Mars. Does that not inspire the heck out of everyone? And just seeing the pictures of the cherry red Roadster orbiting the Earth before it left is just amazing. I love looking at that. I love it. Let's see. The design and development of a capsule for NASA's Commercial Crew Program called the Crew Dragon is also something that SpaceX is working on. Despite being 3 years behind schedule, they did launch an unmanned test with the Crew Dragon to the International Space Station, where it automatically docked with and then returned to Earth successfully with a splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, later, that same Crew Dragon capsule blew up on the test stand while it's being prepared for its in-flight abort test. So it blew up right there on the test stand when they tried to test some of that equipment. This has caused a significant delay with the needed investigation and the redesign of some fuel valves. However, SpaceX seems to be ready to go now for the launch abort test in November, which will clear the way for an actual manned launch with the astronauts to the ISS. That's right, a manned launch to the ISS in an American capsule called Crew Dragon from American soil on the Falcon 9 rocket, and then return any astronauts that need to be returned from the ISS back here, back to Earth. That's amazing. And that will end our reliance on Russia to get US astronauts into space. So that's not enough though with SpaceX. Elon Musk and SpaceX are developing and building a super heavy rocket and a giant spaceship out of stainless steel, which will transport people and cargo to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. This new craft is called the Starship, and it was unveiled at SpaceX's Boca Chica, Texas facility on October 3rd with much fanfare. The shiny new Starship towers over any manned space vehicle ever built. Production of the craft is in full swing, with the Mark I version being built at Boca Chica, a second version being built in Florida, and a third version soon to be built in Boca Chica. The ship could carry up to 100 people at a time. 100 people at a time. And what Elon Musk's plan is to colonize a new Martian city. Colonize a Martian city with humans. That's us. Hey, we could go, right? Are you ready? Did you not hear my Mars weather report? Bring a coat, right? Bring a coat. And lastly is SpaceX's Starlink program, which is going to blanket the Earth's orbit with thousands of satellites, which will provide high-speed internet service to anywhere on Earth. Already a Falcon 9 rocket has launched the first 60 satellites to orbit, and 2 more Starlink launches are planned in the remaining months of this year. The service should be up and running to select areas sometime in 2020. So is that not exciting? They'll be able to provide internet service anywhere on the planet after they've launched these Starlink satellites. And it's going to provide high-speed internet service to the entire planet. Elon Musk and SpaceX, I just like to say, have done more to inspire the entire planet since man's first set foot on the moon. It's truly amazing what they've accomplished. Truly amazing. Absolutely. So here at Space Command, we are enthusiastically following SpaceX and Elon Musk, cheering the whole team on for everything that they're doing. All right. Well, let's talk about Sierra Nevada. Sierra Nevada has developed an amazing mini space shuttle, a space plane called the Dream Chaser. This space plane launches on top of a rocket, and then it re-enters the atmosphere and lands on a runway like a conventional airplane. This is not like the space tourism space plane we talked about with Virgin Galactic. This is much different. This space plane, Dream Chaser, can actually enter orbit. It can dock with the International Space Station. It's planned to, and then return here to Earth and deliver supplies and cargo and experiments that they've been working on up there at the ISS safely back here on the planet. It was supposed to be part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, but didn't make the cut. I don't think they were far enough along in their development to make the cut as far as NASA thought. But you know what? With all of these delays that SpaceX and Boeing are experiencing with their crew capsules, Dream Chaser may have been one of the better choices to deliver astronauts back and forth from the International Space Station. They have actually been chosen to deliver cargo by NASA to and from the International Space Station. Not astronauts, but cargo. The space plane, Dream Chaser, is capable of delivering astronauts into space, and they plan on that. But NASA has not certified them for that to carry U.S. astronauts yet. I believe we'll see that happen though in the near future. So they've won a contract with NASA to take and deliver cargo to the International Space Station, and return experiments and cargo back to the ground. Sierra Nevada still plans on someday carrying astronauts into space. The Dream Chaser is an amazing spacecraft. I'm going to put up an image of the Dream Chaser here in a minute, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It certainly has a bright future ahead of it, and we're cheering on the Dream Chaser and Sierra Nevada as they work to fulfill their dreams of carrying passengers and astronauts to space. All right. Well, Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos has this spacecraft company called Blue Origin, and they're developing a space tourism program as well. They're making a suborbital craft called the New Shepard, and this rocket and crew capsule combo will basically take paying customers up to the edge of space, past the Kármán line, or to the Kármán line, the edge of space, where their passengers immediately become astronauts, and then they'll get their astronaut wings. They'll experience about 5 minutes of weightlessness while they're up there. Of course, the crew capsule separates from the rocket. The crew capsule continues its upward trajectory. The passengers experience, or the astronauts experience, about 5 minutes of weightlessness. The rocket, amazingly, just like SpaceX has done this technology, the rocket amazingly returns to Earth and lands upright on a landing pad. Amazing. And then the capsule Experiences about 5 minutes of weightlessness, as I mentioned. The astronauts buckle back in, and then the capsule just falls back to the ground, to the Earth. Parachutes deploy, and then the capsule returns back to the surface under the parachutes and lands on the ground, not in the ocean. It lands on the surface of the Earth. So that's pretty amazing technology as well. I mean, you have no idea the damage that salt water does to electrical equipment. It's amazing. So the refurbishment that SpaceX has to do on its capsules when they return to Earth and splash down in the Atlantic Ocean is just overwhelming. It really is. That may be one of the reasons why SpaceX lost one of its Crew Dragons. The salt water does a lot of damage. Well, so I've explained how this New Shepard spacecraft by Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin works. Yep. And it's completely reusable. The refurbishment is negligible because it doesn't land in the ocean. As I said, it lands on the ground. So it's reusable. The rocket's reusable. The whole system is reusable. I imagine they could turn it around and send it back up in a short period of time. They've done quite a few test launches and landings with the New Shepard system, and all of them they've taken place successfully. Blue Origin's chief executive Bob Smith and Jeff Bezos are erring on the side of caution, though, as they announced recently that at least 2 more tests are planned this year before Blue Origin will be ready to fly paying customers, or they're thinking early in the year 2020, next year. So Bob Smith has not disclosed the price for the space tourists to fly or disclosed when tickets would go on sale. Blue Origin is also working on developing an orbital heavy lift rocket which would be able to launch large payloads or satellites into orbit. Again, it's important for you to understand the New Shepard capsule and rocket is a suborbital vehicle. And when I say suborbital, what I mean by that is it never actually enters orbit. It just enters the edge of space and then falls back to the ground. So it never actually enters orbit. So that is called suborbital. Now this new Glenn rocket that Blue Origin is developing is going to be an orbital class rocket. That means it'll enter orbit, deliver a satellite or whatever payload it has, and then it will return to Earth. So that's the difference between orbital and suborbital. They're working on that. We'll be watching, and we'll keep you updated on the development of that heavy lift rocket, which we always need more heavy lift rockets, definitely. Also, I mentioned to you earlier that there are 6 different capsules that are part of this new space race. 6 different capsules are being developed or have been developed, and the 6th one that I haven't mentioned yet was developed by Northrop Grumman, and it's called the Cygnus ship. The Cygnus cargo ship has successfully delivered atop an Antares rocket supplies to the ISS, the International Space Station, many times over the last few years. Northrop Grumman has had a successful track record with its contract with NASA to deliver cargo and supplies to the International Space Station. They've been doing a great job at that, and we wish them many more successes in the future. That's the 6th space capsule that's been developed and is working. Well, now if we can just get people up there launching on American spacecraft from American soil, that would be outstanding. Outstanding, right? And exciting. It's going to happen. We're getting close. We can't wait here at Space Command, and we'll be impatiently waiting. But we know that it's getting very close for the first American astronauts to fly on American spacecraft from American soil to the International